In this video, Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about motivational variables by Big Five traits and how different traits work in relationships.
Motivation variables by Big Five traits. Evenings worked. Extroverts are more likely to work evenings. Agreeable people are less likely to work evenings. Now that's interesting, because you might think that if they were agreeable, they'd work more evenings. But I suspect that's what's happening with the agreeable people is that because their primary commitment is to intimate relationships, they're more likely to consider their primary domain their responsibilities to intimate partners of various sorts, and so they'll forego work for that reason. Conscientious people, work is more central to their life, and it's also the case with open people. So, the correlation between agreeableness and hours worked is negative 0.16. The correlation between agreeableness and the hours of work that someone desires is negative 0.17. Here's some things that predict relationship instability and divorce. Most personality traits have substantial effects on mating and parenting related behaviors such as sexual promiscuity, relationship stability, and divorce. Promiscuity and the desire for multiple sexual partners are predicted by extroversion, openness to experience, neuroticism, especially in women, positive schizotypy, which we won't bother with, and the dark traits like narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism. Negative predictors of promiscuity and short-term mating include agreeableness, conscientiousness, honesty, humility in the hexacle model, which is a six-dimensional model, and autistic-like traits. Relationship instability is associated with extroversion, low agreeableness, and low conscientiousness. Yeah, that's high extroversion, low agreeableness, and low conscientiousness. That's tilting quite hard towards psychopathy. So someone who's really extroverted and really low in agreeableness, they tend to be narcissistic. And that's not necessarily a problem if they're high in conscientiousness, because you can still, they might be selfish and after their own interest, but if they're high in conscientiousness, if they tell you that they'll do something, they'll do it, and generally you can expect that they'll tell you the truth. If they're low in conscientiousness, well then you have a big problem, because they tend to be somewhat parasitical, which is one way of defining low conscientiousness, and disagreeable, so they only care about themselves, and extroverted, so they're very dominant and outgoing. So, finally, neuroticism, low conscientiousness, and to a smaller extent, low agreeableness all contribute to increase the likelihood of divorce. There was a 16 PDF study done, you can't see it here because it's cut off on the slide, a couple of years ago. What they did, it's quite interesting, instead of just looking at the zero order correlations between gender and personality, they summed all the differences to see what the overall difference was between men and women. So you'd have one normal distribution that was men and another normal distribution that was women, and then you could see how much they overlapped if you summed up all the gender differences, and the answer was they were 3 standard deviations different in total, which is a whopping difference. It meant that the personality distributions of men and women only overlapped in total by 10%. They found in the 16 PF study, that's an old personality scale that was originally formulated by Cattell, and it was a precursor to the Big Five. The reason they used it was because they had historical data that many thousands of people had filled out. So the fact that it wasn't psychometrically arrayed properly didn't mean there was no information in it. So women were higher in sensitivity, warmth, and apprehension. Warmth and apprehension you could associate it with agreeableness and neuroticism. And men were more emotionally stable, more dominant, more rule conscious, and more vigilant.